Hi guys, it's me for our first lecture in the new semester with American History 2. The first unit that we're going to be going over is the West, the Grand West, the Old West, the Wild West, just the American West. Now, one thing in today's video is just kind of an overview of everything we're going to be talking about. We'll go into more specifics in other videos, specifics dealing with each of the units that we're going to kind of outline today. But the first thing to remember about the West is that while we're talking about it, it is really moving. Right? So let's back up a little bit. Let's go to when we get our independence. Let's kind of put this around 1780. Well, let's even go back further than that. 1763. Right? The end of the French and Indian War. We've got that proclamation of 1763 that sets up the boundary of the colonies for white settlement is the Appalachian Mountains. Everything west of that is the West, considered to be the West. So you've got all this area around like Ohio and Indiana, Illinois. Ooh, I didn't notice that they didn't even put like the outlines of those because of their Great Lakes. But nonetheless, anything west, the Appalachians was considered to be the West. Well, scratch that out. We become our own country, 1781, 1783. And the boundary that is formed from the Treaty of Paris is going to be the Mississippi River. So now we have everything west of this is the West. Right? And that's going to stick with us for a while. But remember, we don't even have much of this yet. Right? We don't have any of this yet. Right? So we consider the West as being further than our country now. But that also sets up that manifest destiny element that even though we don't have it yet, we're going to have it sometime in the future. So that's the West. We get Texas, we get California, we get all this area, and we start to settle. Now, one of the things that's really weird, and we'll kind of put that line back, but we'll kind of make it a soft West now. West of the Mississippi there. Everything over here is the West. But we've got a tricky situation here. We've got California. And it's settled mainly because of gold. Right? So there's going to be tons of people here. And it will become a state. The problem is, all of this huge area, nothing there, except for the natives. In Utah, the Mormons, some buffalo herds, but not really much there. That's the problem that is going to be set up for the rest of the 1800s. Is how do we get California to connect to the rest of the United States? And it's kind of obvious that we're going to have to physically tie this in somehow, either by settling this area and making new states, or by connecting a lifeline, which is one of the ways we accomplish that. This is going to be the Transcontinental Railroad. It's going to be started during the Civil War. This is going to be one of the big things with Lincoln. He pushes through Congress, and Congress is willing. They're wanting to do this anyway, but they're going to push through this idea of a transcontinental railroad to physically tie California with all the people, and more importantly, all that gold. Right? Don't get me wrong; it's really about this gold. They want to tie the gold to the east easily. Right? And it's kind of dangerous now. You can think of this as a land ocean. That's just how daunting crossing the West is. It takes about 3 months by wagon, Conestoga wagon, by wagon. It would take around 6 days by railroad to cover that distance. So you can get people out there quicker, safer if the train doesn't derail. Right? And physically bring this nation together. The other thing is that this movement west, especially after the Civil War, is kind of healing the nation's wounds, or that's the way they talk about it at the time, healing the nation's wounds. We're distracting ourselves from this Reconstruction, this bitterness after the Civil War, and having everybody, pretty much everybody, that wants to move west, be it south, north, white, black, former slave or freedman, can move west and make their own fortune by this new opportunity. The opportunity of west, but also the opportunity of the railroad. The railroad's going to be a driving force in the west. Always the driving force in the west. Now, we've got this transcontinental, once we get the transcontinental railroad completed, right, we have a lot more people going to California, but they're also kind of stopping at places along the way and settling. So this west, even though we see it here, it's settled here, we've got to fill in that space, and that's what these railroads are helping to do. It establishes towns for many different reasons, in which we'll get into later. A lot of it has to do with protection. Right? The U.S. Army, even though we talk about them and we think of them using horses a lot, they are going to use the railroads most of the time. So they're going to be close to the railroads. So if you're having trouble with the natives, it's always good to have your backup with the U.S. Army. Now let's kind of get into that a little bit as well. Our conceptions of the West. Most of the time, they've come through in the 1950s. This is where the American West takes on this iconic symbolism. Good versus bad. That has a lot not to do with the cowboys and the Indians out here, but a lot to do with communism and capitalism, which we'll see later in the 1950s. But during the 1950s, we have new media. TV is taking off. Almost every week there's another cowboy and Indian story. Lonesome Dove, John Wayne movies, later Clint Eastwood movies. Just tons and tons of these things getting out here. Another fact I will mention is that a lot of these are going to be produced by Italian directors. They're going to be called spaghetti westerns because the people producing these and basically writing the stories and the scripts are going to be from Italy. So it's kind of their version of our history. But they're incredibly popular, and they kind of show us what the West was like. Now, one of the things that come out of this is that the West was very, very violent. And this is going to be something that you're going to explore in a DBQ. Right? Was the West as violent as it portrayed? There's some evidence that says it was, other evidence that says it isn't. You're going to have to make your decision there. But the other big thing I want to point out is who had owned this area before us. Right? And I need to get a better eraser. And we'll kind of do a good job of it here. So we've got the Native American communities. Down here we'll put in the Comanche, Navajo. Right, but the big ones are going to be the Cheyenne here in the middle, and closer to South Dakota and North Dakota is going to be the Lakota, which is actually a subset of the, I'm trying to remember if I put the I in the right place, the Sioux. That's a U. The Sioux, Lakota Sioux. Comanche are big in Texas. They are known as some of the best horse warriors around. The Navajo, the Apache, let's put them up there too because they're going to be important, are going to be in the desert southwest. Up here in the northwest, the biggest ones are going to be the Nez Perce tribe, led by a guy named Chief Joseph. But when we think about the American West, usually the natives that a lot of people associate are going to be the Sioux, the Cheyenne, or the Apache. Mainly because those are going to fight the biggest wars of this time period. The Lakota Sioux and the Cheyenne team up at certain time points. The biggest question, though, is who is the aggressor in this fight? And why are they fighting? And that's one thing I don't want to really mention right now because we're going to explore that in class. Keep that in mind. Who is the aggressor in this fight, and why are both sides fighting? One of the things that is from American history is always either this noble vision of Native Americans always being kind to the earth, not taking more than that they need. And then the other side is the savage Indian, the bloodthirsty, killing people all the time, killing and raping women and children, or killing children, and then going around and scalping people. Some of that did happen. You also got to remember that the American soldiers did some of that as well, which we'll definitely see. So it's not as easy or one-sided as it would seem. The other thing I want to talk about, going back to that noble Indian, the protecting of the environment, yes, that is true to some respect. They did treat the land a little bit better than we did. There probably wouldn't have been a Dust Bowl without American settlement of the West. But don't always take that to be the truth. Right? The way natives hunted before they had guns and horses is that they took a buffalo herd, herded them to a cliff, and even if they only needed about 3 or 4 buffalo for their needs, all 60 would be killed, and then the rest would be left to rot. The buffalo, I'm glad I came back to that. The buffalo is going to be a big part of the story. There's not one animal, right, in America's history that has been tied to America more than the buffalo. The American eagle isn't even as important as the buffalo in the story of America, and especially the story of the West. Right? If you want to figure out how the natives got put on reservations, don't look for American bullets, at least not being shot at the Indians. Take a look at the buffalo and what we're going to do with those buffalo. All right, we're going to talk about some battles. A lot of times we want to see this, or it's been kind of portrayed as the natives attacking all the time, and then the American forces coming in and saving the day. That's definitely how the 1950s movies portrayed it. We're going to kind of complicate that and see in which battles does that storyline hold true, and which stories is a little bit more complicated, and which times is it just flat out false. But some of the battles we're going to take a look at is the Battle of Washita, Sand Creek Massacre. We're going to take a look at the Battle of Little Bighorn, probably the most iconic battle. We're going to take a look at a guy named Custer, and take a look at Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. We're going to also take a look at the Nez Perce War, and one of my favorite leaders, Chief Joseph. And then finally, we're going to take a look at Wounded Knee, which is seen as the iconic battle / massacre that ends the Indian Wars. That's it. After Wounded Knee, there's there's a little bit of resistance, but not the major resistance you had seen before. All right, so we've got the native battles kind of covered very quickly. Like I said, this is just anticipatory. This is just setting everything up. We're going to fill in this later, not only in class, but with different videos. But after we get the American West settled, we get Americans out there on farms. And we're going to talk about this concept of why people were moving to the West, their motivations for moving west. That's going to be the first thing we're talking about. And a lot of it has to do with free land. Very few people think of this land as being the best land in the world. Right? It's arid. It's fertile, but the rain doesn't come all that long. You can have the best soil in the world, but if you don't have water, nothing's going to grow. So to encourage people to move into this land, especially in the Rockies and moving towards California, the government is basically giving land away. We're going to talk about a thing called the Homestead Act. We'll take a look at the Pacific Railway Act. We'll take a look at the Memorial Land Grant Act, the Oklahoma Land Rush, all those times where we're either giving land away or giving it away for very, very little money. But that's a big thing. People aren't going to move to this land if they have to pay out the wazoo for it. A lot of the people moving west are going to be immigrants coming from the east who don't have a lot of money to begin with. People in the south that are starting over after the destruction of the Civil War. African Americans moving to the west, escaping persecution, escaping slavery, or the after effects of slavery and Reconstruction South. So it's a big concept of free land. We're going to talk about cowboys and ranch life, how they're different, how they're connected. The other thing we're going to take a look at is the farmers, and they are not going to be happy. Like I said, it's a hard thing to farm or ranch in the West. So they think they are being oppressed by two different people, bankers and railroadmen, versus farmers and ranchers. Not rangers. That would be pretty bad for the railroad owners if they're fighting rangers, because that wouldn't be good for them. But the bankers and railroad owners versus the farmers and ranchers, a lot of this has to do with money you're paying to the railroads to transport crops, and the money you're paying to bankers for loans on your land and on your equipment, things like that. They think that they are being charged too much, that our U.S. Our monetary system is keeping the price of their goods down, so they can't get any more wealth. They're kept in the same spot. So they're going to form the populist movement. Which is going to drive a lot of reforms. They have a lot of ideas that are going to change our nation. Now, they don't get it done primarily. A lot of these things they propose, it's going to take about 10 years and another political party called the Progressives to really push it through Congress and make it nationals. But they've got the ideas. The farmers have the ideas. So we're going to take a look at all of this, and we're going to get the West from basically, let's say, 1850 to 1910. That's the time period we're going to be talking about. See you tomorrow.